So thank you all for coming today. I am so excited to be able to just thank you for all your hard work. I've been reading notes in Optima and can see all the great things y'all are doing in the lives of the children and families that you're working with. And in this upcoming year, we're going to be paying close attention to making sure you're getting credit for everything it is you do. So I know that you guys have been going to court periodically, but sometimes I don't see a write-up about that. I'll be giving you a text about that in the coming months to remind you, don't forget to put your stuff in there. Sometimes when you're submitting court reports before you attend court, you're not giving yourself credit for all that time you spend on that. So I want to make sure that you're going to be recognized for everything you do. So those are two big things that I'll be watching. I think in the newsletter we'll have our numbers about the number of children and families we're serving right now, and we are at 71% coverage, so we're going to need to hustle up and get us some volunteers to get us back into that 80% realm. But I know we can do it. I know y'all are out there talking to friends and neighbors and family about the possibility, and I know if you recommend someone to come, they'll be probably almost as good as you guys are, because I am sure you are protecting our kids and our families too, so you want to make sure you get good people to volunteer. So I really appreciate that. I do want to say a special thank you to Marla. I actually got to see her in court on Monday, and while it was a really tough situation she was in, she was so bold in being able to say what she felt was best for her child, and so eloquently. And the volunteers that I had in training that were struggling to listen to make sure they heard everything she said, they were so impressed, and they so can't wait to be able to advocate for their children too. So thank you so much for that awesome lesson. We really do appreciate that. I understand we're going to have a couple of other opportunities in the coming weeks that we'll be taking new trainees to observe those too. So thank you so much for everything it is you do. I'm just a phone call away. If you need anything, text away. Just let me know, and I'm always available for lunch. Just saying.
And Judge Bauknight will begin her speech. Let me make sure. Thank you again for coming, and we can get started now.
All right. Well, I am Julie Bauknight, and I am just ending my second year on the bench, so I am pretty new, so I'm flattered that y'all asked me to speak today. But I am not new to this community, and I am not new to the legal community. I actually finished law school and was licensed in 1993. And I came here and I worked for George Philly as a prosecutor for 4 years. Took a little time out while I stayed home with kids, and then went back to work not knowing exactly what I wanted to do, but family law kept calling and pushing and calling and pushing, because there's always so much of that. And so my whole private practice was 99.5% family law, which, as you know, intersects some with CPS. I didn't do lots of CPS cases, but I'm certainly familiar with the courtroom, familiar with the area, and I've lived in Victoria since I was 4, so I do know the area well. So thank you very much for having me today, but I also want to thank all of you for your service to this community and for the children and the families of the community. It's the heart that you have to volunteer and the compassion that you have to volunteer that matters and makes a difference. And I'm sure there are some days you wonder if you are making a difference, but you are. You have a good, important, vital role in this system, and I just want to give a shout out to y'all for doing that. There were not really any changes to the law this year because it was not a legislative year. There's a little bit of changes to some protective order language, but that doesn't affect CPS too much at the time. But there were a lot of changes last year the legislature put into place, and I know Judge Marr talked about that last year, and so I'm not going to go into that, but what I do wanna say about that is if you were paying attention to the changes that the legislature made, they sent a message. They limited CPS's power significantly. They dialed them back and said, y'all are overstepping. And your takeaway should be that y'all are separate. You are not CPS, and you need to stand apart and stand alone and form your own opinions and conclusions so that you are recognized as a separate arm of this process and not in line with CPS. Also, what can be discerned from the changes made by the legislature, as well as some of the more recent rulings from the Supreme Court of Texas, is that parental rights are paramount. They are constitutional and they trump everyone else's rights. And I'm sure some of y'all are familiar with or have heard of the case called In Re CJC. And that one has had some significant ramifications because it really pulled back people who are non-parents from getting in there and getting access and getting rights and getting possession to children. And the Supreme Court essentially said no. The parental presumption that the parent is the person that needs to be in that place with their child is so strong that you better come at it with something double that strength to knock the parent back. So that's important to y'all because y'all are put in the role of watching the children, seeing what the children are going through, what the family's going through, what's in the best interest of these children. And when you start with the idea that just because CPS filed, there's obviously something wrong, that I challenge you not to take that assumption. I challenge you to say, okay, CPS filed something, but I'm gonna step back and assess that and look at that and see what's really going on. I'm not going to accept it on face value and start with that premise. I want you to start with, no, my job is still this family and this child, and what's best for the child. And best interest is always what you are having to ask yourselves. So y'all are doing the work, you're pushing up your sleeves, you're getting in there, and you gotta ask yourself what's best. The legislature in the family code gave us some pretty statutory factors for best interest of the child. And if you go through them, I think they're a little more technical. They're things like the age, the physical and mental vulnerabilities, frequency and nature of out-of-home placements, whether the child's been a victim of repeated harm after the initial report, whether the child is fearful of living in or returning to the home. You look at psychiatric and psychological history of abuse, substance abuse. But then the Supreme Court came along and they gave us the Holly factors. And the Holly factors, to me, and I'm sure y'all have heard that term or you've heard people mention it, and the Holly factors is where CASA should really be focusing, because that, to me, is the true heart of the people you're serving and helping. Those are the questions where you get into and you say, what are the desires of the child? And I know, of course, some of these children are very young and they can't express desires, but sometimes we've got older children and they have a good mind or a good idea, and so that's the top Holly factor. Then you ask about the emotional and physical needs of the child now and in the future. The parental abilities of the individual seeking custody. And that one to me is always a tricky one because a lot of times we're dealing with families that aren't well educated. They've had cycles of violence, drugs, poor parenting. They're missing some skills, but you gotta evaluate, are they still the best fit for this child? Can they be educated? Can they break the cycle? Can they be trained in a way that this child gets to stay with their parent? And that goes back to the Supreme Court and the legislature saying parents are the most important thing. You look at what programs are available to assist the individuals to promote the best interests of their child. So I know we've kind of had a little bit, I don't know what it is, a lag and confusion as CPS switched over to Belong and what programs, and I've seen certainly a very slowdown in the cases that are filed. I hope there's some good resources that are coming around or they're strengthening back up that CPS will access, but you can be a source for that. If you're aware of programs, speak up and say, hey, did you know that my church has, or my community or my neighborhood has this program that I think would benefit this parent, and here's why. And that's where you being in it can really help and offer some guidance of things that maybe CPS is not aware of, but will really benefit the families you're working with. You're also supposed to look at the plans for the child by their individuals or by the agency seeking custody. So you get to ask yourself, okay, what's best for the child? What does the parent have planned for this child versus what does the department have planned for this child? The stability of the home or the proposed placement. That's another one of the factors. So, and I know y'all go into the home and you look at the home, so you get to see, and I hope y'all are aware, and I'm sure you are, that sometimes our standards and our beliefs are not what these people's lives really are. And so while we may think, I wouldn't store trash in the corner of my living room, but that's how they live, and this kid is still looked after and still loved and loves mom, loves dad, loves, siblings. That doesn't make it the worst place. It doesn't mean because the foster home's cleaner that the child should be there. It doesn't mean that the foster home has more money and can take the kid for more activities. That doesn't necessarily mean that's the best place for that child. The acts or omissions of the parent, which may indicate that the existing parent-child relationship is not a proper one. So you get to evaluate, y'all know what the parents are accused of and why this has been brought forward, and you get to think about that. Okay, but how does this relate back to the child? What did the parent do, and does it actually affect the parent-child relationship? And then you can look at any excuse for the acts or omissions of the parent. And this was in a case that was actually done by the Texas Supreme Court in 1976. And those factors still show up in case after case after case. The appellate courts, the Supreme Court, everybody refers back to these factors. And so if you familiarize yourself with those when you're going through really trying to evaluate what's best for the child, you'll be in line and in par with the Supreme Court and how they want these things to be viewed and tested. And like I said, of course, the statutory factors are there, but I feel that those are just, like I said, a little bit more technical, and these allow you some more ability to really get in there and think and look at the individual situations that you're looking at and how the child you're working with is truly affected by what's going on. So, I have also, aside from that, well, I'll go ahead and ask if anybody has any questions about that part of it before I kind of switch. Are y'all all familiar with the Holly factors? I've all talked about them or seen them and stuff.
Oh, yes, it's a big part of training.
Okay, good. I'm glad to hear that. Okay, good. And y'all have access to the list of them so you can see them. Perfect. Okay. Well, and then the other thing that I have had is a question about the courtroom situation. And I understand that I don't know if it's confusion or curiosity or I'm not sure what, but there has been some expression about why there's so much conferring at the courthouse and why. So that's a good question. And I think that there's probably some frustration, and there was something about why not just be prepared? Why go and just confer? And my thought, I have a lot of thoughts on that, but conferring definitely has its place. Now, showing up at the courthouse, whether it's going to end up being conferring or it's going to end up as a hearing, you should be prepared no matter what and ready to go. You should assume, I gotta know what I'm talking about, I need to have done, I need to have visited the child, I need to be ready to testify. But conferring, right now, I think with CPS, they've had so much turmoil and they've had difficulty staffing. And so I know just this Monday, the CPS attorney was told on Friday, guess what, you get to go to court Monday and handle these cases. And then he got there and they didn't even give him any notes. He had no idea what the cases were about, and I'm sure those of you that were in court noticed that. And that's not to knock him, he's a really good attorney. It's just that their system is not working real well right now. And so sometimes conferring is, because that attorney that they sent for the day has to get on board, and he's gotta get up to speed and figure out what's happening. So that's part of it. But the other thing is that really, in my opinion, a majority of cases should not end up in contested hearings. There's a lot of things that can be worked out and agreed to, but as y'all know, parties are often not cooperative. And in CPS, they get defensive, they think that they're being targeted, they think that they've been wronged by the department, and they don't really want to work or do things until they just have to. And so when you show up at the courthouse and you spend the time conferring, there is really something very real about courthouse pressure. And some, more times than not, people who are unreasonable and didn't want to be cooperative get there and think, oh, okay, this is real. I probably should open my mind a little bit and try to be cooperative and see what's going on. And so to me, that is the value in conferring. I mean, if every single case we had to be a contested hearing, none of us would ever leave the courthouse 5 days a week, every week. So it really does have value and placement. And I do understand that it can be frustrating if you have gone and you've gotten yourself prepared and you're ready to talk, and then nobody asks you what you have to say. I hope in the conferring in the hallway that y'all are getting included and that people are asking what your input is. And if not, insert yourself. Get up there and say, wait a minute, I'm the one that's been talking to this kid. I have some things to say. I have some perspective. I have some knowledge. So assert yourself and do that, because it may make a difference in how they're looking at things. It may make a difference on a point of conferring as to, you know, what service the parent needs to do or not do, or how much visitation there is. So I you know, step forward. You're there for a reason. You have a vital role, so make sure your voice is heard, even if it's not in the courtroom testifying. And then I did want to say, one of the things I have heard, I know that a lot of people are interested in my style and my preferences in the courtroom, and I like to say I'm pretty laid back, I really am, but I also am very interested. And so I appreciate the information. I like to know the stories. I like to know the backstories. I like to know what's happening. It gives me a broader picture to understand some of the nuances that are in these cases. And I've also heard from a lot of people that it shows up in the courtroom that I am a mom. And I think it was meant as a compliment, but even if it wasn't, it is such a compliment to me. Because what it tells me is that y'all know that I am seeing the children, and I am seeing the families, and compassion, which is what all of y'all have for doing this position, is something I do have. And there are times, I mean, I am a stickler, I will tell you, I like things prepared, I like things neat and orderly. I really like the decorum of court. I like the formality and the respect of the process and the courtroom and everything that's going on. I do like that. Okay, I'm not dancing. Yeah, no, I'm not dancing. So anyway, but I do like that, and I always want to see the families that are in the middle of this, because it's important. These are their lives, and what happens in these cases impacts them, you know, good or bad. It impacts these families and these children forever. It's gonna make a mark of some sort, so I never want to lose sight of seeing those families in the situation. And so I like to hear from you guys. I like to know that y'all are in there, and that y'all are looking, and you're helping me see what I can't see out of the courtroom. Because you're in the homes, you're talking to the kids, you're making the observations. And so I do appreciate that. And I think that's about all I have on this. I was gonna leave y'all the Holly Factors, but I'm glad to know y'all have that.
Yes.
But if y'all have any questions, I am happy to have a discussion about stuff or talk with y'all, or if there's more you wanna know about how I like to do stuff. I hope y'all feel I'm approachable.
What got you into this?
Into
Into your whole ordeal you got?
my whole
Getting
what?
into law or something like that,
Oh.
what'd you get into to do it?
Well, truthfully, I was a very argumentative teenager. I really wanted to be a psychiatrist, but I have a kind of a weak stomach for some medical things, and I really did not know at that point in time how much psychiatry is involved in family law. So it kind of worked out well. I've always been fascinated by that kind of stuff, and I feel like I'm pretty good at figuring out mental illness diagnoses. So they did dovetail, but yes, I was very argumentative. Also big reader, and I got an English degree in college, and I just always knew that law school was where it was going to be. And so that's how I got there, and I haven't regretted it. And my highest grade in law school was family law. And my family law professor is a retired district judge now out of San Antonio. And he remembers very well when I told him I'm never practicing family law. And he always tells me, what was that? Yes, here I am. Yeah. Yes,
So,
ma'am.
in some of the other counties where we serve in Gonzales and Lavaca, mediations are really important in their process. And I notice we don't do very many down here. Is there yay or nay about why we don't do them? Because they seem to be very beneficial in that realm.
There's an openness to mediation, and in fact, one of our local rules says that if an attorney asks for mediation, unless there's a really good cause not to do it, that mediation gets granted. Now, why we haven't affirmatively started with that, I don't know, because the same thing with family law cases in all the other counties. A lot of them, you may not schedule a contested hearing until you certify that you've gone to mediation first. And we've never gotten on board with that. I don't really know why, but I do know that if there are cases and mediation is appropriate, that ought to be suggested. And then if it's put forth, it would go to mediation. And maybe the more that happened and the more they were tried out, the more responsive it would be to go ahead and do that in the first place.
So if in the process, the team thought that that was a good thing, whether it be, our volunteer wanted to see something like that, because who would we tell that to? The Lytton or the Long, or how to get that process started in our areas?
Well, if you could get it to the CPS attorney and they agreed it could be done, the attorney for the kids is probably a good one because they're, I think, more in the middle than the attorney for the parents. I think you probably would get better response out of that attorney. And I know, like, specifically Joyce Heller, she likes mediation. She's a fan of mediation. So that would probably be your top two to go to, and then you just have to see in a certain case if one parent seems more willing to work on things, if that parent's attorney would also have that attitude.
It just seems, it's such a, when you get to that point, sometimes termination is not the thing, but there's gotta be we all have to be on the same table to find a good solution for this family. And I just think it might be beneficial in some cases.
Yeah, I'm sure it would be. I would agree with that. I'm not anti-mediation by any means.
Anybody else questions?
So, when we're giving testimony, I get a little bit conflicted as to how much detail, like I do weekly visits with my kids. So, from what you were saying, you really like to get a good picture of what goes on, so more is okay.
Yes, and I know, of course, sometimes y'all get limited by, I asked you a question, answer just the question. But I notice a lot of times the attorneys have said, I'd like CASA to testify, and they give you a little room to just say what you wanna say. And so, yes, I mean, yes, I like to hear it. I don't know about the other judges, but I like to, because I'm making significant, weighty decisions about stuff. And I like to have a picture of what's been going on. I mean, obviously we can't spend hours doing that, but yes, a good, clear picture of what's going on. It's helpful. Yes.
I have a funny question. Do your children like to argue with you? Because my daughter
Yes.
argues with me, maybe she'll be a judge. I don't know.
I have very, very opinionated children. And there's a lot that they will do and say, and then they'll just get, my mom's an attorney. But yes, they do argue, but thankfully I'm at the tail end. The youngest one finishes college in December, he's 21, and so the older two are married, the third one's engaged, and then he finishes college, and so I'm moving towards the end. So now it's not so much arguing, but it is very spirited discussions when we have different opinions, and nobody in my house is quiet. Yes, it is. It is.
Do you bring your business home with you, or do you leave it at the office?
It depends, because I cover 6 counties, and in Victoria, Judge Garza does all the criminal, unless we're doing a backup, like if there's 2 criminal trials. But in the other 5 counties, I do criminal and civil. And so some of the criminal cases are hard. And I'm not sure if y'all can tell from y'all's perspective or not, but the number of sexual assault cases in all the counties, and particularly with children being the victims, is tremendous. I mean, it's appalling when you look at the dockets and you see, continuous sexual abuse, sexual assault of a child, indecency, online solicitation. I mean, it's just, our children are absolutely being victimized in terrible ways throughout. And those are hard to let go. They're really hard to let go. Yes, ma'am.
Would most of those be drug usage or abuse related, or mental abuse, or mental health?
I don't know if I have a good feel for that. I mean, there was a case last year, 22, that y'all might have heard about in Edna, the little 4-year-old boy that was murdered by his mother and her boyfriend. And it was absolutely horrific. I mean, that child was tortured. And I kept thinking, there must be drugs involved. And I kept asking, and everybody said, no, there's no sign of drugs. And so that one, I'm glad I didn't hear all of that case. I was just kind of shadowing, knowing I was coming into being a judge. And I don't think I could have sat through seeing all of that. And I worry about the day that I do have to, because it is my trial. And it's heartbreaking. But for me, not even hearing the evidence, just looking at the list of offenses on those dockets, I just think, my gosh, somewhere we're breaking down and not protecting our children like we need to.
What specific details would you like to hear from CASA when we're limited on our time to speak?
I really like to know the child's connection to the parent. Is it there, is it not there? Like yesterday, and that's why I've noticed, I actually really like interviewing the children. I really do. They tell you so much, and they're so open once you get them past that little bit of barrier and hesitation. And I always make sure to tell them, this is private, yes, it's being recorded, but if your mom or your dad comes and says that they want it because they want to see what you said, my answer is no. And if they're gonna get it, they're gonna have to go take it and have the 13th Court of Appeals tell me I have to turn it over. And once I assure them that it's me and them, that we're just talking, they really open up and they spill. And I'm sure y'all get that too in your area. And so I like to know, how is this child truly affected? Because sometimes we've got a terrible parent who's not doing well, but this kid is absolutely attached. I mean, this is their parent, and that love bond, parent-child bond, is really, really strong. And so I want to hear that, because then to me, we need to be doing all we can to fix the parent so that we don't have to sever that bond. So that's probably one of the top things I want to hear, is how this kid perceives that parent-child bond and what this is doing to that child.
Okay, thank you. What information do you want the volunteers and staff to include in their court reports that they're writing?
I mean, I guess again, the parent-child relationship, and if you can just make it clear, like what exactly instigated this, and what can we do, or what is being done to fix that initial problem, and again, the impact on the child, and is the child on board? Because I've had some CPS cases where the kids are like, I really don't want to see my mom. I love her, I don't want to terminate it, but I don't want to see her right now. She's not in a good space that's healthy for me. And that's a tough one. It is, especially if the parent isn't, you're not sure the parent's ever going to get it together. But again, that's the child speaking out and saying, that's still my mom. And I know at times we have to make the tough decisions, and it's a parent who is never going to get better, is never going to fix anything, and is going to ultimately cause more harm to the child than the child can understand. And I recognize that too, but I really want to know how this child is affected. Yes,
I heard your explanation on conferring,
yes,
which I was uneducated about, I hear it. So why is it that in other courtrooms, okay, I'm not saying in Victoria, but I'm saying in the state of Texas, why is it in other courtrooms, you walk in, you better be prepared right then and there? There's no doubt about it. Trial starts at 9, everybody's there at 9, everybody's ready to go, and they don't have conferring, so.
well, in a perfect world, even on all the other cases, it would be really nice if attorneys had conferred before they get to court.
Okay.
But the reality is that they don't. I mean, you're prepping the day before, getting your case ready, because all week you handled everything else, and now, oh my gosh, tomorrow I have court on this case, let me look really quick. And they don't call each other and talk about it, even in the criminal cases. The defense attorneys are not calling the DA's office and vice versa to go talk and look at everything ahead of time. And I've heard Judge Williams describe our dockets as being attorney-driven. And so many other places in Texas don't even understand our system at all. They don't understand how it can be one judge today and a different judge tomorrow, same case. It's just the way it's always worked here. And so being an attorney-driven docket, we're letting them, like, we're here, we're available, this is the court's time, tell us how to need us, instead of us telling them, do this, do this, do this.
All right, I understand what you're saying, but on the CASA side of it, when I'm sitting there for an hour and a half waiting for my trial to start is,
Right.
It makes it that I don't understand what's going on.
Yes, and sometimes I feel that pain too, because sometimes I'm sitting up there waiting, and
Yes, I know.
nobody's coming up to tell me they need any court time, and I'm like, in fact, last week, I had attorneys that were conferring all day long, and at 5:45, I went in and said, 5-minute warning, and I'm out, because I was like, that's enough. So every now and then I'll do that, but, having been on the flip side, it goes back again to the conferring is useful. And it seems to everybody who's sitting out there like it's a waste of time, but sometimes you've got unreasonable people, and they are not going to get reasonable until they sit there and watch a little bit and see, I'm gonna have to go up there and testify. I'm gonna have to admit this. I'm going to have to, say, oops, I did do that. And that pressure is enough to make them realize, okay, this is serious.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
That concludes the questions.
Oh, wait, no, got one more.
Oh.
No, I have like
I didn't see
7.
All right, keep firing.
So, of course. So, I know we kind of hit on this subject in previous previous conversations about the agreed orders and things that get circulated. But I think one of the best experience for a parent during this process is to have to stand there in front of a judge and, let the judge remind them how serious this is, how their children are waiting for them, and get yourself together, kind of thing.
Right.
And we're missing that with that agreed orders, and sometimes I think parents don't take it as seriously because they don't get that little reprimand every time. So,
I can see that. Yes, and that, I guess, is just a balancing of time. But maybe, maybe if it's a parent that you think that little push will make all the difference, then tell CPS, I know it's an agreed order, but can we just present the order and have the judge admonish the mom? Cause then that's not that much extra time to do that, not by any means.
Because especially, like you had mentioned about the bond between the parent and the child, and I know our volunteers are reminding the parents that, your kids are waiting and they love you and they want you to get better, they wanna come home, but sometimes they need that little extra push to, try to get it going in the right direction. Because we all want the kids to be able to go home to a healthy and happy place, so.
And sometimes I am reminded, sometimes you think you're sitting up there and what you say doesn't really make a difference. And then sometimes you get some feedback that like, wow, that little thing that I said mattered. It made a difference. And so I'm open to that, just to add a little caveat to help push.
Okay, that'd be great. Now that they're not doing removals, see, I told you I had a lot of questions, y'all. We're not doing removals as much as we previously did, or they previously did. But now the, instances seem to be so much more severe. But there's rarely any criminal charges that come with the severity of the abuse or the sexual abuse or things like that. Why is there such a disconnect, do you know?
I really don't know. I don't know, but I do think that, and sometimes in cases I look to see, like, okay, surely there's a criminal charge pending. And yeah, you're right, a lot of times there's not. I don't know where the disconnect is that doesn't put those two parts together.
That was just an observation. Okay, someone else have a turn?
Yes, right here.
Have you had any cases where CASA and CPS going in with each other?
Wait, say that again?
Have you had a situation where CASA and CPS going in with each other? Because we have a different opinion of what's going on, and I know in the past, some of them they want to take that, I know it versus my decision, whatever, and I had, no, it's not, I'm not here to agree with you, whatever, my opinion is this is good, that, I'm gonna tell them, whatever, I
Right.
don't agree with what you're going on, and then you got that situation going on.
Yes, and that's what I want you to do, because as the trier of fact, when that's presented, I get to decide.
Yeah.
If you seem like you know more what's going on and you've met with the kid more time and you have a stronger idea, I get to decide if I want to weigh your opinion heavier than I do CPS's. So that's why I say, don't always align yourself. Make sure you really fully believe and it's your opinion and you stick to it.
I've always told you, I'm not here for you, so you go and decide what you want to do. When I get through going through my evaluation and everything, then my opinion gonna go whatever, so.
Yes.
You tell Joe what you think, and I'm gonna tell him what I think,
Yep, I applaud that.
Yeah.
Okay, you're on 4, 5.
Well, I'm gonna keep you here all afternoon.
That's all right. I only have to be somewhere at 2:30, so I think we're plenty good.
Judge Bauknight, I'd like to thank you for when we're having our swearing-ins, for making it special for CASA and for our advocates.
Aw.
We really appreciate that, absolutely.
You're welcome.
And also, you're a judger, but you present as non-judgmental. And we're
Thank
always
you.
trying to share that with our volunteers and our staff, that we're non-judgmental, and
Oh.
I know.
Yeah.
Hey, can you tell she's a judge? Yeah.
When it does come to termination and we're at the point where we need to make that decision, what do we need to take into consideration?
So
When
when
we're
you
starting to
decide
consider.
it's best for the child that the parents be terminated?
Yes. What do we need to take, what all do we need to take into consideration?
Long term, where's this child gonna be? And what tools are available for the child to process that? Cause I wanna know going forward, how are we gonna keep this child, feeling like they haven't been rejected or abandoned and a lot of times that's often filled by the foster family and they've got a great family that's gonna step up and adopt them and so, but I think psychologically it shows that parental abandonment is still a factor. So I'd like to know that, but I also wanna hear like why is it so bad that it can't be repaired? And sometimes it's obvious, but sometimes it's a little more subtle. And so I wanna hear good details on how this parent has just failed to come through for the child.
And that also goes back to the Holly factor.
Right.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. Yes.
I just want to say, on one of my recent cases, I wanted to thank you because you really listened to the child and she's fixing to age out and there was no reason for her to be in care. And so you really listened to her and you basically dismissed her case and that was like the best thing.
Yes, she, yeah. I hope she makes it. I hope she does.
Wow,
Awesome, that's great.
You know, you said something to her that, you said, I believe in you. You told her that. And lit her up. Now she's got a GED already and she has an ID and everything.
Oh, I'm
And
so
when
proud of you.
She texted me and I told her that you were here. She said, I'm coming. So-
I am so proud of you. That's amazing. I knew. You had some fire in you and you've been put in some tough spots and you've pulled yourself up. So I'm really happy to see you here. Thank you for coming.
She also said she wants to become a CASA volunteer later on.
Oh,
that's great. That's great.
Wonderful.
Good for you.
Good. Oh gosh, that makes my heart feel. That's just fantastic.
Yeah.
Good.
Well, thank you so much
Oh wait, one
for.
more.
You let me know when you're done.
I was watching you, I timed it that way. I know you see a lot in the courtroom, but what is the one thing that you just will not tolerate, that really will set you off, and you will not tolerate?
Just in general,
Yeah, sure.
everybody? Oh my goodness. I really do not like people who are late or don't show up. And you would be surprised how many attorneys do that. I actually just held an attorney in contempt in Cuero for not coming to court when he was supposed to. That really aggravates me, and then to not even have the decency to come up and say, I am so sorry I'm late, I was caught in traffic, I had a doctor's appointment, something. But I've had a lot of people that just sail in like they own it all, and I find that annoying. We've teased my mom my whole life because I think she's Siamese twins with Emily Post. And so I was brought up very manners, etiquette, manners, So I have a lot of that, and it's a solemn place, and it has so much formality and decorum, and there's so many places in society we don't have that anymore, and so I like that in there. And I like that it's orderly, and so when that gets disrupted, it does aggravate me. And I also really don't like, and I try to be tolerant in CPS cases, but I really don't like clothing that says, I don't really care that I'm here. I've had people show up in shirts that I think are inappropriate, and I make the bailiff go, make them turn it inside out. I've had people show up with their belly showing, and I'm like, nope. So in that way, I am a stickler about those kind of things, and so that, I guess anything that comes across as disrespectful, or that person thinks they are more important than the process,
Yes,
that is very bothersome to me.
Charlene, I'm done.
Anyone else have any questions? Okay, well, thank you for your
Thank you,
time.
Jen.
Thank you.